Hello and welcome to the FNAF Community Update. I'm GiBi here with Toto, and we're going to be answering some questions that I have found in my comments section, as well as giving the usual community update, where we recommend a channel that I have found this week. Question 1. In Sister Location, there's a part where Angsty Teen Hand Unit says, argumentative, standards, elevation, passive, heights. You seem to just brush it off as saying ASAP is not a phase mom because I'm an angsty teenager. Is there a reason you brushed it off? It seems to me to be exactly how someone might add lore by using anagrams. Does it really mean nothing? Are there theories about what it could mean? So I am hurt. I feel like I didn't just brush it off. In fact, I feel like I solved what it was meant to be. So there's a point where the hand unit system uses angsty teen voice to make it more fun for Mike. So funny for the player, I guess, then too. And then he gets shocked and he reboots. And he just randomly spouts out, argumentative, standards, elevation, passive, heights. And this is a technically meaningless phrase. And I said, okay, what if we take this and we make it just an acronym? ASAP. Well, what does ASAP mean? And so I started Googling it, and I'm like, it kind of is the same as this angel that exists, but not really. I'm like, oh, well, what else could it mean? Well, ASAP is an anagram of the word phase, which is what Taylor points out, meaning that ASAP is explicitly not a phase, because it's an anagram. So if this is phase, this is ASAP. It's not a phase. In the context of the scene, what's happening is that the character that's an angsty teen is being rebooted and turning back into normal hand unit. Something an angsty teen might say is, it's not a phase, mom. And if ASAP is another way of saying not a phase, then the joke is that you have an angsty teenager saying it's not a phase. I don't feel like I brushed it off. I feel like I just stated that, that is my interpretation of it being a joke. I guess you could say I brushed it off as a joke, but there's lots of stuff in FNAF that's just jokes. I don't think there's lore relevance that he turned into an angsty teen. I just think that's something Scott thought would be funny. I know that the community has looked into other potential meanings of this, and I haven't seen really any conclusion besides the joke that I just said. So, could there be lore hidden in there? Absolutely. I looked at it, again, I went on all these tangents. For my too long FNAF video, I went on lots of tangents that didn't make it into the video because it was too long, but also because they didn't go anywhere. I had this whole section about Asaph the angel, but I'm like, no, that's just not what it is, so it's not what we're going to talk about here. We're going to talk about how it's not a phase, mom. Yeah, there's a biblical character named Asaph, and there's a psalm of Asaph, and so I was going to go in and I was going to treat it like I do in my my analysis videos, where I'd break down poetry. I was going to break down this biblical section, and I was halfway through writing it, and I'm like, it's not even spelled the same. That's just totally not what it is. This is useless, and I literally deleted that from my script. So yeah, I tried. Genuinely, I did look into this. I didn't just brush it off. I thought FNAF 1 took place after the restaurant already closed, just like in the movie. The location isn't in use anymore, so it doesn't necessarily matter what year the game takes place in, since it's unknown just how long it's been closed. So this is something that, at one point, at the very least, Matt Pat was toying with. He may have made a timeline with that being his, FNAF 1 takes place after the restaurant closed. And I think his reason was that it was closed in the Silver Eyes, and it's also closed in the movie. So, yes, that is a thing that makes sense. My problem with using stuff across mediums literally is that you always have to take into account what the story is trying to do and what needs to be true for the story to take place. So in The Silver Eyes, the book is taking place 10 years after the MCI, and they're going back to this closed down restaurant. In the movie, it's also taking place after the place shut down from the MCI. They don't have these multiple openings. If you play through the first game, the only interpretation you can really have that the location's closed is if you assume that Phone Guy's recordings are from a long time ago. Obviously, the game implies that they're literally from last week, but if you interpret that they may be from a while ago and that you're the night guard after the place closed, you can just kind of brush that off. Now that the week before has come out, we know for a fact the location is not closed. In fact, it just reopened. During the events of the week before, there are people there every day. Ralph is cleaning stuff every day. In fact, there's one ending you can do where you don't screw Bonnie's head back on right, and so the next day while they're in operation, his head falls off mid-performance. So yes, the FNAF 1 location, certainly now that the week before is out, certainly is happening while the restaurant is in operation. There was a period of time when Matt Pat thought it might not be, and I think he experimented with theories like that, and correct, in the movie and in the Silver Eyes, it's not. But during the games, FNAF 1 is during an operation of the restaurant. The wonderful Withered Circle says, what do you think the mimic line of Endo saw that caused them to be decommissioned, as we find out in Tales? And in your opinion, could it be related to any incident we've seen before? So in the Tales from the Pizzaplex stories, we learn that the mimic program was written a very long time ago. This would have been, I think, before even FNAF 4 takes place sometime in the 80s. This guy has a son, his wife dies, he builds robots for Freddy, he makes a program, it's Mimic, and then his son gets dead too. It's all sad, and it might not even be real. My problem with answering any questions to deal with the Tales from the Pizzaplex books is that just like the Fazbear Frights book, there's a question about whether or not they're in the same continuity as the games. I think people are more likely to believe that Tales from the Pizzaplex is game canon and Fazbear Frights is not than they are to say that they're both not canon or they both are canon. That's just my interpretation from being in the community. I should do a poll on that. I will do a poll on that. Before this video goes up, I will do a poll on that. So 4 hours after I made that poll, I've received about 900 votes, and currently with 57% of that vote, people are saying that they don't believe either series happens in the game timeline. But a solid second place is saying that Frights does not happen, but Tales does. Now, this is also biased with the audience of people I've cultivated on my channel. I think if I were to ask this on some very neutral forum, like Twitter or Reddit or something like that, then the option that Frights doesn't happen, but Tales does would be a little more popular. But it is definitely true that more people think that Tales happens than Frights happens. But overall, it looks like the majority, a solid majority, think that neither happens. Anyway, my problem with answering this question is that we don't know if Tales is canon. I'm currently reading through all the Fazbear Frights books in a whole long playlist. It's coming out every single Sunday. I'm going to premiere the new videos on each Fazbear Frights stories. And after that, I'm going to do the Tales from the Pizzaplex stories too. I don't think until after I finish that series and until after we get Secrets from the Mimic are we going to be able to note whether or not the books are actually games canon. And so while this is a great question, I really don't even feel like investigating a possibility when the answer might just be that it's not possible for us to answer yet with the information that we have. Secret of the Mimic might literally just completely disprove that the books are canon like the moment it comes out. So I feel like right now, where we're in this time period where we know the game's coming out, but it's not out yet, theorizing that kind of stuff is just kind of like, all the work I do is going to be disproven when the game comes out. Either the books are canon or they're not, so what am I wasting my time for? The Delightful Dual Process Theory left another comment under one of my videos, and they had a very good point about Frights fiction, the theory. The theory, of course, being that the Fazbear Frights series of novel is an in-universe book, the same way that Help Wanted was supposed to be an in-universe game, the same way that Princess Quest is an in-universe game. But in this case, it's something being developed or written and sent out by Fazbear Entertainment, and so these are books that are not literal. They're not actually happening within the story of the games, but they are something that matters because the characters could read them and they could give us insight into what is known by the public and what isn't. So I point out as I go through the stories evidence for and against this theory. Some evidence against the theory might be if the author knows something that theoretically they shouldn't know. At the moment, I do believe in Frights fiction, but again, as I go through the series, I'm going to make my ultimate decision at the end when I'm done reading through and investigating and analyzing all the stories. But Connie from Dual Process Theory says, while I do think that Frights fiction is canon, that doesn't disclude some stories from being parallels to things that happened in universe. Sure, the in-universe authors wouldn't know this stuff, but Scott Cawthon is writing both Frights and the games. The parallel/mirror characters and events are a pretty easy staple to establish stuff. So previously, Connie had commented that Spring Bonnie in Into the Pit might be a mirror parallel for William, in that they are the father of a character who is currently going through some stuff, as symbolized by Spring Bonnie. And one of my comments was like, oh, well, how would they know? How could Oz be a mic stand-in if it's being written in universe? And Dual Process's correct comment is basically like, yeah, but what if it's both? And the way that they explain it is actually better than ways I've been able to articulate this point before, but they continue and say, Luz in the Owl House, relating her situation to Azora's. Azora is fictional in universe, but when Luz narrates her stories, it's clear that she's supposed to parallel her/Amity, etc. I don't know this reference, but it makes sense. So basically saying that a character like Edwin, the guy who made the Mimic program and whose son got dead, could be a Henry parallel, and also be a fictional story in universe, because Scott is writing both. And I agree, it's just been a difficult thing to articulate. Why did people think Afton stuffed the MCI kids into the OG4 when we literally see the puppet do it in Give Gifts, Give Life minigame? Another point to the puppet doing it is that the Give Life part of the name. The puppet is putting the bodies in the suits, giving them life. So I have two answers for that. The first is basically just the folly that because we heard first that the kids were stuffed in the suits in FNAF 1 before the puppet existed, people just assumed that the murderer did it. So in FNAF 2, we were just sort of already believing that, and so any amount of new information would have a hard hurdle to get through before it could convince us of something else. My second point is that I still believe that William stuffed the kids. I do not think that Give Gifts Give Life is actually an indication of the puppet stuffing. This is something that's controversial and different theorists believe different things, but Give Gifts Give Life, the arcade game, is very symbolic. Like, I don't think that the puppet took a wrapped present and floated it in front of each of the 4 bodies, and then when that didn't work, put a mask of each character onto their head. In fact, in Help Wanted, we see behind the curtains in mid-MCI a representation of the 3 kids that have already died. We see ourselves and then 2 other people who are already in their animatronics, with the implication being that William, who in this situation in this scene is Glitch Trap, is the one putting us into the suits. So in Give Gifts Give Life, symbolically the puppet's doing it. In Help Wanted, symbolically William's doing it. In the books and the movie, William does it because the puppet doesn't exist. Although this goes back to what I was just saying about not looking into other mediums because you have to change it to fit the story. If you read into Candy Cadet's story, I think it's very clear that Charlie is the girl in the story about all the keys. So she's able to give life to all of the kids who were killed in the MCI. But I don't think that that physically means that she put them in the suits. I think that means that she gave them enough remnant to tie them to life, and that she hadn't really meant to do it. If you interpret that story a certain way, it seems like Charlie could have healed one of them with her remnant, because remnant can heal people. And instead of doing that, she divided her remnant amongst all 5 of them, which caused them to possess their suits instead of one of them actually physically healing from their injuries and being alive. Instead of carrying the key to 1 life, she had the key to 5 deaths. I don't think I explained this very well, but in FNAF 6, one of Candy Cadet's stories is about a girl. She's in a room, there's 5 keys, she can use one of the keys to open a door and save a kid from a big fire. She ends up melting the keys together to try to open all the doors, but that doesn't work, and so instead they all burn to death. I think this is symbolic of the puppet saving the 5 kids. Because Remnant can heal people, I believe that she had the ability, she had the power to use her Remnant to physically heal all of the wounds from one of the MCI kids. William could have stabbed them, she could have healed them, and then they would have lived. But instead what she does is give part of her remnant to all 5 kids, thus allowing them to possess their animatronic but not actually come back to life. If she didn't give her remnant and instead just put them inside the suits, then this metaphor doesn't mean anything. There's actually no allegory for saving them either. If she puts them in the suits physically as opposed to lending them her remnant, then how could she possibly have saved one? Unless it's implying that only putting one of them into one of the suits would have brought them back to life? Again, if you read it that this Candy Cadet story is about this instance, then it's clear that what brings them to life is her passing on her remnant to them, not physically putting them inside the suits. I know that ID's Fantasy is going to make a video soon about Candy Cadet stories, and I think that she believes something similar to this. So if you're confused by what I just said, I'm sure that she'll explain it in her video. So no, I do not think that the puppet physically stuffed them into suits, I think that she just gave them life, and that William hid them in the suits. Otherwise, you have to ask the question of where William thinks the bodies went. So I guess what I'm taking issue with is the phrase, we literally see the puppet do it in the minigame, because we don't literally see the puppet do it in the minigame, we symbolically see the puppet do it in the minigame. Like, we don't literally think that all 4 bodies were sitting in a room and allowing the puppet to do this, because we know the MCI took place over the course of multiple days. And again, in all other media, there isn't a puppet-like character who puts the kids' bodies in the suits, it's always William hiding the evidence. In fact, the bodies not being there for evidence is what probably allows William to walk free, so he has a motivation to hide them in there. Their second question, if the OG4 were used to make the toys, how did they not find the MCI kids' bodies in the OG4 if they took them apart? So it's a theory that the toys are only brought to life because they have remnant from the MCI kids whose parts were used, the Withered animatronics parts were used to build the toy animatronics, or to fix up the toy animatronics, so that's why they're haunted, because they have remnant in them. How is this possible if the bodies are still in the suits from the MCI? I personally believe that they are, but a lot of people don't. They think that William or someone else would have removed the bodies from the suits after the MCI, but before FNAF 2. The thing is, it doesn't actually matter. If you believe that the bodies were taken out of the suits before FNAF 2, you don't need to worry about it. My theory is that William took the bodies out of the suits during the events of Save Them. The events of Save Them happened when William was the night guard before the start of FNAF 2. So if he removed the bodies on that night, several more nights passed, the animatronics started coming after him, he requests to be moved to the day shift, he's moved to the day shift, you're hired, you start playing. It's during that time, those days, after William took the bodies out, while he was still night guard, while he was day guard, and then while you were night guard, that the toy animatronics could have had the remnant moved into them. William, as night guard, says that they just started acting up. The game actually strongly indicates that they're not attacking him until after Save Them. So if Fazbear Entertainment started using the Withereds for parts after Save Them, they wouldn't have noticed the bodies. Although, as I continually say, it's very, very silly to think that there could possibly be a body stuffed inside of Foxy due to all of the holes in him. So, 1, it's just something silly we need to deal with. 2, if you think that the bodies were taken out before FNAF 2, you don't need to worry about it. And 3, if you think the bodies were taken out before the physical nighttime gameplay of FNAF 2, but during the backstory in which Save Them happened, you also don't need to worry about it. So that's my answer. One of my favorite videos I've ever made is my analysis of Count the Ways, one of the Fazbear Frights stories. In that book, we follow Millie, who's a goth teenage girl whose parents have moved to Saudi Arabia to teach, and so she's stuck with her grandpa. And he's old, and he just doesn't get it. She hates the world, she's always miserable, she thinks that she's better than everyone else, but she also hates herself. Basically, she's a teenager. We learn that her parents are kind of weird, and they keep hopping from job to job. They open a food truck, even though they don't know how to cook. They open a yarn store, even though they don't know how to tell a yarn. And they have a house that they bought to build and to fix up, and then they painted the front side of it and then never painted the back. And so they're like, oh, if you're looking at it from the front, it looks all nice and good. It doesn't matter that the back's not done. And Millie compares this to when you buy a bad Christmas tree and you just put the ugly part in the back. I symbolically related these two things, with the parents like never finishing anything, to them not finishing raising Millie because they ran off to Saudi Arabia. Thus Millie became like the house that they didn't finish painting. Linkle the Historian, great name, underrated game, Hyrule Warriors, had it on the Wii U, says, also, I think Millie could be a half-painted house, in that she was raised and dressed properly, given the things she wanted materialistically, but deprived emotionally. They thought no one would notice if they dressed her up and made her look like she was well taken care of, but people noticed it through her attitude. And that's just a phenomenal interpretation. I loved that. I want to highlight it. The final comment for the day comes from my theory that Charlie was part of the MCI. I believe that the 5 original missing kids would have been Charlie, Gabriel, Fritz, Susie, and Jeremy, and that Save Them, which happens in 1987, is the death of Cassidy. I have a whole video about that. If that sounds wild to you, watch the video. I think it might be a little bit convincing. But at the end of that video, I had one problem, which is, if Charlie was killed in an alleyway, why would the newspaper say that the bodies weren't found? If her body was just left there, not stuffed in a suit, not stuffed into the puppet, obviously, because there's nowhere to stuff it. If you look at the thumbnail of that video, I had to Photoshop Charlie's body inside the puppet. It looks ridiculous, which causes the issue that I call the amazing disappearing Charlie body. Basically, my theory falls apart if I can't explain what happened to Charlie. As much as I love it and believe it and want to find this piece of evidence that solves everything, I do recognize it's a weak theory because of this point. And then Pizza Stops Time came in and solved everything. He points out that I said Charlie wasn't missing, and while this is technically true, he wants me to listen again to the Night 1 phone call from FNAF 1. Upon discovering that damage or death has occurred, a missing persons report will be filed within 90 days, or as soon as property and premises have been thoroughly cleaned and bleached and the carpets have been replaced. Charlie would have been a missing persons report if she was found by Fazbear employees, because that's what they do. They cover up deaths. They would never have said, oh, a kid was murdered outside our doors. They would have just filed a missing report. That's the piece of evidence I was looking for. That's the solution. Pizza time, you just... Pizza Stops Time, you're not Spider-Man. Pizza Stops Time, you just solved the amazing disappearing Charlie body. Thank you. I'm now even more convinced in my theory called CASADCI. Genuinely, this was genius. Thank you very much. That's just chef's kiss. And finally, as part of my community update, I wanted to mention a YouTube channel I found. They actually left a comment on one of my videos called ClavisKey. They've made a couple of videos about the theories and parallels between the books and the games, and they have a great video about Into the Pit that actually does kind of what I did in my Into the Pit video, my book analysis Into the Pit video, where they went through the story and analyzed some of the symbolism. They actually did it before me. Great editing, great insights. I hope that this channel does well. They're currently only sitting at 367 subscribers. I was the 367th subscriber. Go check out their channel. I'm going to have it linked below in the description. But again, their Truth of the Pit FNAF theory video is phenomenal, as is their Secret Victim of the Pit. I hope they keep it up. I hope we see more from this creator in the near future. I can't have all of these videos mentioning Candy Bunny, but she did just release a phenomenal video that is an in-universe take of the MCI, basically pretending to be a true crime podcast, but from the world of Five Nights at Freddy's, where she looks into it as if she was like a real person from today, looking back at these murders that happened a long time ago. Also a great video. And that's been the FNAF community update. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can leave them in the questions, comments, and concerns section. It's right below the video. You knew that. You can follow me on Twitter at GiBi_Devin. Please be nice to each other in the comments, consider supporting the creators you admire, never lose sight of the things that are most important to you, and remember that Freddy stands for Friendly, Respectful Engagement, Discussion, and Discourse Yield Success. I'll be back this Sunday with my discussion and analysis of the next Fazbear Frights story, Fetch. Clifford, you see Toto, Clifford? You see Toto? Go get him! He's a lazy dog.